road from you with load shedding. Thank you so much, Yolanda. Thank you, Anne, for a platform like this to always have this opportunity to speak about women, women in trade, and from a development or economic development perspective. I'm Yavi Madurai. I'm the Executive Director of the Pan-African Business Women's Association, or as we lovingly like to call it, PABWA. We are a think tank for economic transformation, and we look at initiatives, research studies, and development campaigns, projects, and programs that allow Africa's women and youth to be able to actively participate, and be included in the economic agenda of Africa via various initiatives, programs, and campaigns. So digital is my skill base. When I'm not fighting for women's rights, it's what I do in my spare time, so to speak. Digitalization, before COVID, so pre-COVID, there was this horrible term that used to be used, and I say horrible because it's a personal, I'm a techie. So when we hear the term fourth industrial revolution, no. So digital transformation or digitalization was being bandied about, before COVID. Pre-COVID, we heard about, Internet of Things and how it was going to change our lives, and how factories were going to be manless, so to speak, or womanless, so to speak, and so on and so forth. And then COVID hit, and we were put in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, as it's called. Before COVID, my one statement used to be that the fourth industrial revolution is actually a revolution for women. Women were left out. When we speak about, not being left behind, women were left behind in many ways. And I'll give you a quick example of that. And I'm not even talking, we won't even get to, rural women and young people that don't have access to online. We won't even go there, as yet, because that is the biggest issue. Let's come back to the people that do have access to online. They were, around you on a regular basis. You're a chairperson, you're a board, I'm assuming you're an electrical engineer. So you're part of a world of working women. And how often have you heard, and have the women on this panel heard, the story of having to leave a career, either to take a sabbatical or to leave your job because you need to separate yourself, or divide yourself up between working, 12, 15 hours a day and being able to be at home for when you have your baby, for example, and kids, and. With the world, as COVID impacted us, we all of a sudden had inclusivity because women were taking care of their kids and being able to be present at work using the digital solutions. So all of a sudden, the world changed to create inclusivity for women in various ways. Now let's talk about rural and youth and access to online. Connectivity in Africa is shocking. You and I just are impacted by load shedding as we speak in South Africa. And when there's load shedding, literally there's no signal. I have fiber and I still can't access. I have an inverter and I still can't access. It's so shocking. So digitalization and connectivity, the digital divide is wide in Africa. The gender digital divide is even wider, which leads to the economic divide and the non-inclusion of women in the economic agenda of Africa. With digitalization, women that are not, traditional across the continent, that, not necessarily able to work because, husbands want them at home, or traditional based systems, can now have, shops, online shops via Instagram and Facebook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's different ends of the spectrum. There's different ways, we can talk about this for an hour, but I don't want to take up too much time in answering you. But this is basically why digitalization and increased connectivity and closing the gender digital divide, or focusing on closing the gender digital divide as we close the digital divide, becomes critical, because economic inclusion is, after all, the decade that we are living in terms of 2020 to 2030's economic and financial inclusion of women. Sure. So if you look at, and I'm going to speak very loosely now, but across the continent, various countries have programs, especially coding programs for young children and youth and young women specifically. We need to encourage our young women and young girls to get involved in industries that are male dominated. So sometimes it's a case of, not encouraging our daughters and our granddaughters and our sisters in getting involved. I mean, you're a classic case of that. You're a classic example of that. I'm a classic example of that. In terms of getting into industries where it is male dominated, the technology industry is male dominated, but there are coding courses, there are online free coding courses. Governments across the continent, the United Nations, UNECA, the African Union, there are various entities, and I could go on naming many, that have free access to online classes, skills development, education, knowledge building from 5 years old right through to old women who now need to also close their digital understanding and their digital gaps. So it's not just about youngsters all the time, it's also about the older generation because they are economically contributing. But across the spectrum, there are things that are available. There is nothing that is not available today. But unfortunately, we have to balance the issue of the fact that you still need access in order to be able to do that. But schools, universities all offer free courses. Keep an eye out for it. Ask questions. Look, speak to your teachers. Ask them, speak to people in the know, and you will get the information that you need to be able to access some of these programs. There's a myriad of them. Kabwa has, you can follow us on social media. Every now and again, we post all the different opportunities that are available for, it doesn't matter how old, from very young to very old in terms of digital skills development and digital knowledge building. So, one of the biggest things, Yolanda, is that we focus on support in ways that are not, and they sometimes big ways. So we look and trust me, I mean, obviously when I say that, I don't mean that something is more important or less important than something else, because obviously the big things are extremely important. But like access to finance is the number one challenge for women in business, whether that's an informal trader or whether that's, large business, small to medium enterprise, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the biggest things that we need, and Phyllis spoke about it, and the reason I'm raising it is because it has become a core issue for Papua. And the reason it's become a core issue is because of the research that has been done and the information and what our audience or our market across Africa is telling us. So I'm telling you what we have been told, in other words. Information on the African continent has become or is currency. And when information becomes currency, it does not land in the hands of the people that need it the most. So before we even get to digitalization or access to information via online, information in general does not reach all corners, all nooks and crannies of the continent. Papua's strategic pillar until 2023 is about democratization of information and ensuring that we devalue the currency that is placed on information. And as Phyllis said as well, it may not seem like it's a big thing because information is information. Why is it such a big story? But women don't have access to it. I'll give you a classic example when it comes to the AFCFTA. The AFCFTA was created, actually, the way it works is that the small business owner actually stands to benefit the most in the way that it's structured. So, if you look at tariffs, if you look at NTBs, if you look at those kind of things, actually the small business owner will benefit relatively. I'm speaking relatively. So when we looked at what information is going out, and I mean, I was a moderator for 2 sessions this morning around the AFCFTA. One of the biggest things from big business, from small business, let alone informal traders or rural women, were we don't have information. The private sector is crying, we don't have information. So we incapacitate ourselves by not holding those that owe us information accountable. So like our governments, we don't necessarily go to our unions, our membership organizations, and demand the information that we need. Now let's talk digitalization in the context of what I've just said. There are various things and various access points and various programs and initiatives that are running for women. If you, I mean, you're in an organization, all of us here in some shape or form work in the civil society environment, whether we are engaging with them or like me, whether we are civil society ourselves, is that funding right now is focused on women and youth. So if you go to any funding organization and say to them, I want to do skills development on digitalization for women and youth, they will throw money at you. So there are various programs, initiatives, projects that are happening across the continent for digitalization of initiatives, areas, geographical locations, but specifically for women and youth in Africa and to upskill us to that point. It also comes down to our own initiative. We've got this thing in Africa, and I'm going to say it because it happened, we have it, you know, we happen upon it all the time, is that we also expect a lot to be put in our hands and not necessarily for us to go and look for the information and try to find information that is going to equip us and make us better at what we do. So if we are standard right now, and if we need to be excellent, there is tons of information that is available that if we looked and if we made an effort, we will find, and it's not necessarily all digitalized or all online. So I think it's a balance of initiative and asking around and pushing and you know, not letting boundaries stop you in terms of if you want something, if you want access to information, you will find it if you work and if you look hard enough to be able to find it. So it's a combination of holding those accountable that need to give us access to information and the information itself, as well as the digitalization opportunities. So that is skills development, that is knowledge building, that is capacity using digital. So as connectivity grows in Africa, governments need to support that connectivity by teaching citizens how to use online and how to use the digital world. And there are programs. The smallest, poorest country in Africa, when we looked at it, has programs. So it's not like they don't have. Yes, they may have less than the bigger countries, but they have. So it's a combination of our own initiative. And as women, we will go and dig and find and look for things. So I know that if I say this to women, they will go and look for it. I know if I say it, they will go and find it. So it's a matter of our own initiative, but also holding the relevant authorities or organizations or entities accountable. And when I say accountable, sometimes they may not have it. Like if you come to Pabwa and you say, I want, I don't know, something specific, and we don't have it, I guarantee you, because we've got to focus on it, somebody will come back to you and say to you, let us go and look for it. It may take us a little while, but we will go and find it and we will bring it back to you purely because it's going to help other women as well. So it's a matter of working together. It's that collective power that we were just talking about. Women do that so well, don't we? We like come together as a sister, we even go to the bathrooms together. So from a collective environment, if we're able to take that sisterhood and the things that work for us as women and apply it to this environment, it will work. We have seen it happen. We are seeing it happen in our programs and our projects, and we will see it grow and happen as the digital divide starts to close. And the louder our voice is, depends on you. So the louder we fight, the more we fight, the louder our voices, depends on what information you give us to tell us what you are lacking. And I am but one organization in a continent of many women's organizations fighting for these things. So step out, look out, work at it, ask, you know, people are there, use it, use the access that is available to you, and take advantage of what is there. Three things. So I'm going to address it in terms of the title of today's panel: trade, development, and and gender. So when we look at it from a trade perspective, the AfCFTA was created for Africa's 1.3 billion people and drove a message of unity. But it is gender blind, and therefore the Women in Trade Protocol. We do not need permission as the women of Africa to take advantage of any economic inclusion tool or opportunity that is available to us. And therefore, we submitted for the Women in Trade Protocol as PABWA, but also from a women perspective, we need to do two things. There are many policies, 100 gazillion policies that are created on a regular basis because somebody has to tick a box around gender. We need to start holding leadership on the continent accountable for those policies and regulations. In closing, my context for that statement is to say it is the African Women's Decade of Economic and Financial Inclusion 2020 to 2030. The previous one, 2010 to 2020, resulted in a 0.000 result after 10 years. We cannot allow that to happen again, and therefore we need to hold our governments and the African Union accountable in terms of that economic